Hello, it's Scott MacArthur here, and welcome to ARTEFACT, where we try and unpick the art and science of stories. This is episode 13. I'm absolutely amazed that we've got that far, but I'm also absolutely delighted that we've got this far. And I've had some lovely feedback again this week, and I might touch on that. Well, I will touch on that later on. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about transformation and story. And as I always do, I like to create a bridge between what happened last week and this week. But this week I'm going to do 2 weeks, because this is quite a pivotal evening for us, because it brings together in a real world story some of the things we've been learning together for the last 12 weeks or so. If you remember, those of you who tuned in 2 weeks ago, we met the American comedian George Carlin. And he told a story of how people suffering from shell shock in the First World War, and how how people suffering from shell shock in the First World War were suddenly relabeled over a number of other wars, disappointing though they are, to become post-traumatic stress disorder. And he explained how that had changed how these diseases were perceived by individuals who were suffering from these issues and by the public. Then last week, when we had the lovely Ben Affia with us, we looked at the power of language and how we can use language to differentiate ourselves, how we can use language to emphasize what our stories are. And this week, with my guest, Joanne Lockwood, we're going to get into that in a much deeper way and have a brief example of how language impacts on our lives and how we are perceived and how others perceive us. So, but I'll get back to Joanne shortly. Now, some of you might spy behind me here. Where is he? This is Angus. Where is he? You know, I've been doing this for 3 months and I still get my turning to my right and my left wrong. This is Angus the Gonk, and Angus is those of you who know your Scottish tartan. This is the MacArthur tartan, or as my dad likes to call us, the MacArthurs. It's St Andrew's Day today, so happy St Andrew's Day. And it's not as big a day as perhaps the Irish annual day is in Scotland, but nevertheless, there's quite a good story behind it, because it kind of sums up the how stories can last. Because Angus there was named after King Angus, and King Angus was the guy who in the 9th century was planning for a battle with the English. And the night before the battle, he dreamt of St Andrew, and St Andrew was protecting him as he was going into battle with the English. And indeed, the next day, just before the battle began, he looked up into the sky in a place called Athelstainsford, which is just outside Edinburgh, near a place called Harrington in Scotland. And he saw in the sky the characteristic X shape or cross shape of the saltire, and he went into battle, he believed, with St Andrews at his back. That's a lot of nonsense, but it's a good story, isn't it? And the Scots to this day, hundreds of years later, are very proud of that flag, as are every country. But that story is one that resonates across Scotland, and particularly today. So happy St Andrew's Day. There should be a drink or something, I think, that we all have on St Andrew's Day. I don't know, maybe we should have a dram at the end of this. I've got a bottle behind me, so I might just crack one open when we finish. So anyway, so what the theme of tonight, we're going to look at transformation, and we're going to look at one, maybe two aspects. Now, I'm being slightly vague there, because the person who's joined us, Joanne, and I, we know each other, and we speak often, and I know we can talk. So I'll stick to one at the moment, and I know Joe's listening, so we'll stick at one at the moment, Joe. But we might get to a second one, because we're going to try and stick to the 45 minutes. So I'd like to introduce now Joe. I'll put Joe onto the screen now. Can you let me know if you can hear me okay, folks, please? You're on, Joe.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you again.
Likewise. Could I just check? Could somebody let me know if you can hear me okay? Because it's I think it's okay. I can hear a few other people talking, messaging me. Sorry, but if someone can just let me know. There's a few people on tonight, which is great. If you can just let me know you can hear us or not. Loud and clear. Joe, how are you?
I'm very good. As you can see, I've got Santa out. I've got my tree out, so I'm Christmas ready. Ready.
You're showing me up, actually. My Christmas stuff is all out in a shed outside in the back garden, and between where I am at the moment in the back garden, there's a lot of wind and heavy rain, and I've just not been able to pluck up the courage to go out and get the Christmas tree box out. But I'm definitely under pressure from the kids to get Christmas trees and things up in my little studio here. So next week, folks, I might have some fairy lights for you. So anyway, so Joe, introduce yourself. What was it that you? I mean, there was a little introduction in the preamble that we sent out to everybody, but give the audience a little bit of a background to you, please.
Okay, well, I describe myself as an inclusion and belonging specialist. So I work with organisations throughout the UK, Europe, and elsewhere, focusing on helping them build an inclusive culture that nurtures belonging for their teams. And so I work with a lot of talent acquisition teams, talking about sorting out their debiasing their hiring processes, consulting on strategies around that, and also running workshops and seminars around that as well.
Okay.
But that wasn't me forever. I've only been doing this for about 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
Before that, I ran my own IT company, and I have a couple of them over various iterations since the mid '90s. And yeah, so I was very much an IT geek, supporting small and medium enterprises on their IT infrastructure. And in fact, if you go further back in time, I was an electronics engineer in the RAF when I first left school. So
Were you?
I've done a bit of I'm a veteran apparently. So
Oh,
I qualify for a veteran's rail card, no less. So yeah, I've never fired a shot in anger, but I was certainly trained on how to fire SLRs and submachine guns and some various
oh, good Lord.
various weapons. Yeah,
Right.
even
Where
learned
were
how to
you?
throw a grenade.
Yeah. None tonight, please. Where were you in the RAF? I didn't know you were in the RAF.
Yeah, I didn't. It wasn't a long and illustrious career. I really only spent my time in basic training, and I did an
Ah,
apprenticeship with them. And just after the apprenticeship, we parted ways for various reasons, and that's a whole another episode, so we won't go into that.
okay.
But yeah, no, I left. I joined from school, and I arrived. I left the RAF. Well, I think when I was 18, I think, and then back into Civvy Street. So it was only three and a bit years. And
Ah, yeah.
instead of going to university like everybody else, I joined the RAF.
Right, okay.
Got my HND, got my technical qualifications, got an apprenticeship, and partied on, as they say.
Yeah, I can't really remember many of my student days or my early days in life because I think I was partying too much, Joe. So what was it that, I mean, you've had these different careers, but the one where you're at now, what got you to that phase? I think it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah, so the elephant in the room is I'm trans. I transitioned,
Mm,
so I was living a fairly typical white middle class male life. 2 children, married for 33 years, and I got to a point in my life where I described it. I was going a bit mouldy. I was past my sell-by date.
right.
I needed to sort of listen to my inner voice and not keep hiding and living this kind of remote control life
Mhm.
beneath this suit of armor. Um, and yeah, at the time I was kind of constrained by responsibility. We have I was a parent, a child, a sibling, a spouse, all these kind of things. So you have all these things going on in your life. Yeah, you have mortgages and dependents, and also you've got your network, your reputation, your career, all this capital investment you've made in yourself for the, for the previous 40 odd years of your life. So there's all this pressure to keep on your rails, carry on in the same direction, and
Right.
don't force change. But it gets to a point in your life, and for me, it was just a gradual realization that this wasn't who I was, and it'd always been there. And it got to a
Mm,
point where the phrase I describe is it just became necessary to create change,
right.
and I became a bit destructive, I suppose, in the end of that period because I wanted to change so badly. I was kind of trigger happy
Mhm.
in terms of what I was prepared to sacrifice, and it got down to the point where I was prepared to sacrifice everything I currently had, with the exception of the relationship I had with my wife,
Yes.
and I wasn't in a great place mentally. I was never what we would call clinically depressed, but I was certainly in a pretty lousy place.
Yeah.
struggling to get out of bed some days, crying a lot,
Right.
very moody, grumpy, unapproachable.
Hmm.
And I wasn't sure myself what it was. But
Right.
and then I think for whatever reason, I lost weight. I started taking cross-sex hormones in about
Right.
2016. I I started laser surgery on my face, or laser hair removal. So I had my face, a hair zapped off my face,
Yeah.
and it all kind of came together. That this me emerged from this pile of rubble, and I realised that this me was the real me, and the
Hmm.
rest of it was kind of this life that I'd travelled on. This journey I travelled on through life was kind of, it was okay. It was fine. I wasn't sad. It just wasn't the me inside. And
Hmm.
once I discovered that me inside, it just became necessary to do something about it. And that was
Hmm.
early 2017. My business partners bought me out, so I sold my shares of my business. Wasn't a fortune. It was a good redundancy package, if you like, and gave me enough money really to invest in my future. And
Hmm.
it bought me 2 years, 2 years of life to get off and start what I'm doing now, really. So that's where it came
Right.
from.
Okay.
And my
Okay.
passion really, it revolved around initially improving the world for people like me. And it quickly broadened out to improving the world for people like anybody.
Right. One thing, just as an observation, John, you've. I mean, obviously, I know you and I know the way you talk, but in that description, and I want to tease a little bit more out of that, but you're very, very good at words like, you use the word rubble. Yeah, you use the word muddled. They're very, very descriptive, onomatopoeic words. Have you always been somebody that used words like that?
Yeah, I've always speaked in metaphors and
Right.
similes, and I'm a very visual thinker, and I like to describe how I see the world, the pictures in my head. I like to describe those to other people. So,
Yeah.
yeah, people have always, even in my old life, people used to say, in fact, people used to work for me. You say, "Oh, I love the way you describe things because it kind of it brings it to life." And
Yeah.
I never really thought much about it, but that's kind of how I've always spoken. It's kind of in pictures, in visions, and painting my vision, if you like, into people's eyes, and trying
Yeah.
creating this relatable storyline, if you like.
Because it really is noticeable. And I think when Ben was on last week, Ben Affia, who's a language expert, he was encouraging us to use these types of words. So it doesn't. I don't think it comes natural to everyone. The one that you use a lot with me is you say, "Well, I'll show you my working." Like when you're at school. Remember,
Mm.
you obviously you've used it with me, and I love that. And I have nicked it. I mean, I've used it because it really helps people understand how you got to where you've got to. Yeah. So
Mm.
yeah, I love it, and it's very noticeable. And I've got just one piece of feedback from someone, Joe. Someone's saying you're a little bit quiet. I wonder if you could turn your microphone up a little bit. I don't know if that'll help, but
It is what it is.
it is
I
what
have
it is.
moved a bit closer, so I will speak
Okay,
up a bit. Maybe
okay.
I was having my midnight radio voice on instead. Maybe if I speak up
Right, okay. Tom Morley says, "Yeah, rubble. We all know it, but few of us admit to it." Yeah,
a bit of Barney
yeah,
Rubble.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, I think I get what Tom's saying there because I only in the last 2 or 3 years have I really started to unearth a lot of my own stories and tell my rubble stories. But so back to you, please. How? Because I mean, this is not an experience that I've been through, and it's I imagine quite a dramatic. I can't think of a much more dramatic experience to go through. How? Maybe there is.
The power
Maybe
of
there is.
understatement, is it? The power of understatement. Yeah,
I'm just
a
saying
bit
what
of
I
a
think.
traumatic. It was
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of,
just saying what I
yeah.
think. But how did you describe that? What was the narrative that you adopted when you were telling your wife or your friends or whatever? How did you back then?
Well, I mean, the way I kind of described it is, there's several ways I described it. Is one of the ways I described it was I transitioned in chunks. So I moved bits of my life from the old to the new in kind of chunks. So I thought,
Okay.
well, I was a trustee of a charity, so I opened up about myself to the charity, and then the charity from that point forward knew me as Joe,
Yeah.
and my family kind of knew me, and some of my friends knew me. So I got bits of me moved over, a chunk of me here, a chunk of me there, and I got to the point where there was a few bits of key bricks left over, and that was kind of my my ability to earn a living. So my work.
Yeah.
I wasn't brave enough at the time to open up to my business partners because I was aware that they had some kind of less than trans positive views which they'd shared in the past with me about somebody else, and I internalized a lot of their views. And to be fair, they're not bad people. They just had bad language and probably little experience. So
Mm.
I was very reluctant. But I guess my public outing myself, I kind of outed myself on Facebook one night after a few drinks. Once that, yeah, we were we had some corporate hospitality with BAR Land Rover in Portsmouth, and it's the
Right.
I think is it the America's Cup, the big boat race or the
Yeah. Yeah.
yachting race in the harbour at Portsmouth, and so we were guests of BAR Land Rover at the big place down there with the what's it the can't remember, what's the yachtsman's name, the famous one, the
Oh, I've no idea.
I was going to say Ben Ainsley. It's not Ben. Is it Ben
Oh.
Ainsley?
Ben Ainsley is a yachtsman. Won lots of
Yeah, in that
gold
case,
medals.
it's I think it's Ben Ainsley or something or whoever it
Yeah.
was. It's got there's this big BAR Land Rover racing hangar there and training centre, and we were there drinking champagne like it's going out of fashion. The, the glass was never empty. Someone was always topping it up. And we started this about 11 o'clock in the morning, and then we had lunch on the boat with a bottle of wine. Then we had more, and then this. And of course, by the time it gets about 8 o'clock at night, we're all kind of very well oiled and very kind of hammered. And
Yes.
as is the case when you're married, it doesn't take much to spark off a bit of a niggle when you've both had a few drinks, and we both had a bit of a we both had a bit of a Barney on, sitting out at the terraces of Gunwharf. Actually, I think it was all bar one with another bottle of wine, and we ended up in one of those well sod you type conversations, but
Oh
with
dear.
the F word,
Oh
and
dear.
then we both ended up walking off in different directions.
Oh my goodness.
And I think I must have found a bench or somewhere to sit, and I thought, and I just thought, well, now's the time. I'm just going to tell the world. I'm sick of keeping it secret. I'm sick. My wife already knew, and I'd already told my children about a week beforehand. But my wife had done it for about 4 years at the time. So I just decided on Facebook, and I think I posted something like, "I'm trans, get over it," sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And then I promptly, like you do, went back home, fell asleep, woke up the next morning with this kind of like, I'm sure something happened last night. And
Oh,
you come round and think, wonder what that was. And you get your phone, check it, and go, oh yeah, it did, didn't it? And the mistake I made at that point was deleting the post on Facebook.
did you?
I deleted it. And it wasn't because I
Oh,
was ashamed of it. It was I didn't want to be that kind of needy. It's like one of those needy sort of cry for help posts. I was always more embarrassed about the fact that I posted in that way than what I posted. So I deleted it, and then it occurred to me about 15 seconds later that I had absolutely no idea who'd seen the post. So I was now
gosh.
playing Russian roulette with my friends. Did you know or don't you know, kind of thing. And so I ended up thinking, well, I started phoning around. Um, my brother thought someone had stolen my stolen my phone, and was frapping me. I phoned a
Ah,
few friends, and they'd seen it, but I must have spent 3 or 4 days just phoning people, talking to people, going, yep, yep, yep. I then spent the next 2 weeks meeting people for coffee, going through the Q&A that you end up going through in these coming out sort of stories.
yes.
Everyone wants to know firsthand. Everybody wants to get the dirt. Everyone wants to ask their questions. Everybody wants to ask you what your plans are and surgery and all these kind of
Yeah.
typical kind of yucky trans type questions you always get. And
Yeah.
but in the majority of cases, it was very positive. Everyone's kind of like, I don't get it. I go, I don't get it either. But there it is. And
Yeah.
So that was kind of the very public outing. But anyway, that had kind of happened. That kind of happened in the summer in 2016.
Hmm.
My wife and I were already in the middle of, well, at the beginning of working with Channel 4, but doing a documentary. So we took part with 8 other contributors, and they followed us for 3 years. And that's still on Channel 4 downloads. If you look at it, it's called The Making of Me.
All right. Okay.
And tangenting, doing a bit of a Ronnie Corbett here, going off into the other direction, we also appeared, our segment appeared on Gogglebox on the Friday after. So not only did we spend 3 years filming this documentary, which was effectively marriage guidance in front of the nation, but our bit also got dissected by the people on the sofa. So we
Oh,
were a
oh,
fly on the wall, watching the fly on the wall, which is quite interesting. And I actually used that clip and some of my training exercises and when I did some training workshops. And it's
yeah.
always a good finish. You do all this talking and they say, well, look, here's the real life and chuck that on the table and watch that. And it's always very powerful to get the conversations going because it opens up a few other things about how people just talk about trans people. They don't always talk about their families, the impact on the wife, the husband, the parents, the children, all those sort of things. And it's a very good segue into opening up about the challenges that partners can have in this situation. So, yeah, it was. So, yeah, 3 years of that. Anyway,
Oh, oh,
back to my original thread of the story. So there I
yes.
was, kind of transitioning in chunks, and the last step was my business partners offered to buy me out, and
Right.
yeah, I put my hand on my heart. I was not a great performing human being, director, partner, business owner. My mind was all over the place. I wasn't in a good place. And when they offered to buy me out, I said, "Yep. How quickly can we do this?" And it took us
Right.
about, even in a cooperative environment, it still took us 3.5 months, I think, 2.5 months.
Oh,
So
God.
eventually, it was like around about the 1st of March, that 2017. Um, and that was kind of at the time I described it as, we're talking about here the metaphors and the similes and things. So
Yes.
at that point there, I was talking about drowning in a swimming pool with these chains pulling me under the water. And these
Mm,
chains were the responsibilities I had.
mm,
And I was cutting the chains one by one to the point where I could just get my head above water and take a breath before I was dragged under again. And I was kept. And the final chain I was trying to cut was earning an income, the financial responsibility, the working for a living. And when they
yes.
offered to buy me out, that was like the final sort of cut of the chain that freed me to breathe and
Yes.
climb out the pool. And of
Yes.
course, then I was faced with the reality
God.
of making this happen. So I'd broken free. Um, and another analogy that similarly I use is do you remember Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, the original,
Yes.
where
Yes.
there's that big flash of lightning and this person appears
Yes.
naked
Naked.
in a car
Yeah.
park somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I describe my transition. I'd sold my business. I'd cut ties with my previous life, and I effectively appeared naked,
Mm,
like a
yes.
Terminator, traveling through time,
Yes.
waking up, going, right, now what am I going to do? I've got no track record. I've got no life. I've got no history. I've got nothing to trade off of. I'm just naked,
Yes.
and that's how
Yes.
I came out of this. Well, I had to rebuild everything from scratch,
Good Lord.
with the one sort of like anchor in there being the relationship with my wife, and just, well, largely my mum was pretty supportive. My network of friends were pretty supportive,
Mhm.
but my children were struggling a bit, and I had no job. I had some cash in the bank, which was
Yes.
depleting on a daily basis,
Yes.
but yeah, there I was trying to reinvent myself at the age of 52 years old from a standing start and a new career.
Yes.
So
How,
yeah, it was.
it's extraordinary, Joe. Was the inner story you were telling yourself the same as the one you're projecting, or were you putting on a sort of a brave face, or were you just muddling through?
In those early weeks and months in 2017, I was quite a mess still. Quite, even though I'd broken free, I didn't want to paint myself back into the corner because there I
Right.
was, no job, no income. I signed a non-compete, so I couldn't go back into IT, and I didn't want to
Oh,
anyway.
yes.
I didn't
Right.
want to
Okay.
go back into IT. I mean, I didn't want to. So in a way, I was happy to not compete. I didn't want to compete. Um, but I was yeah, I was unemployed. I started applying for jobs, for roles, and I was using LinkedIn and CV. And what I struggled with, the first line of your CV in most cases is name, and I didn't know what my name was because
Good Lord.
I'd been calling myself Joanne Lockwood for about, I don't know, 4 years.
Mm.
Joanne wasn't my previous name, and Lockwood's not my previous name. So I've got my wife Marie has my original surname, having married me and changed her name. My children have my original surname. My parents obviously have. But I was now faced with this. Do I change my surname
Yeah.
and my forename, or do I
Mhm.
or do I just change my forename and keep my own surname? And you can imagine how my wife felt, where the person she married is now
Yeah.
changing the name completely to be different to hers. So, but I'd built such a relationship with this name; it was now me.
Yes.
So I was kind of like, I was coming up with these permutations about my name, trying to keep my initials, and it was like, and I just thought, why am I procrastinating here? This is my
Mm.
name. All I'm
Yes.
trying to do is keep everybody else happy. If I didn't have to consider anybody else in the world, my name is Joanne Lockwood.
Yeah.
And I sort of said to my wife, that's my decision. Final answer. I can phone a friend, ask the audience, or go 50-50 if you like. But that is
Yes.
my final answer.
Yes.
And she kind of went, okay, fine,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. And it wasn't a kind of a reluctant fine. It was kind of like, yeah, I get it. If that makes you happy, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother anybody else.
Yes.
Do it. So it was
Yes.
all in my head, and I was kind of like wrestling with this decision. And really, it didn't matter to anybody else. Okay, it made a lot of people scratch their heads, and if I people often ask me where I got my name from, and that's another story which I can tell. But uh,
Go on then.
it's probably about I think it was about 2012, 2013, around that time. That's when I first started actively exploring my gender and looking at it. And I joined an online sort of support forum, and
Right.
they wanted a name. So I out out of nowhere put the name Joanne, and Joanne was a girl I knew when I was in secondary school, around the age of 12 or 13, and
Yes.
she was my first crush. So somehow her name stuck in my head all my life. And when I needed to come up with a girl's names out of nowhere, the name Joanne popped into my head.
Crumbs.
So
Right.
and that was fine. And then a few years passed, and I decided to set up myself a Facebook account to sort of build my life, my friends, and keep in contact when you're doing things like this. And of course, Facebook wants a surname. So I thought, surname, that's a bit tricky. I don't want to use my real surname in case you get kind of bleed and sort of,
Oh yeah.
it was a fit.
Mm.
And my, my birth surname is kind of ironic, really. But I'll tell you that in a minute. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what my birth surname is in a minute. Um, so there I was, logging into Facebook, and it wants surname. I thought, wow, okay, well, I stole her first name. I might as well steal her second name as well. So my first crush, Joanne Lockwood, became me.
Is that right? Brilliant.
It is. So,
The whole
so
thing.
I nicked her entire name. And I mean,
Excellent.
the people that know that I keep in contact with from those school days, it's only one
Yeah.
person that I really keep in. Well, it's probably two. There's probably about three people that know me and know her, but I don't really keep in contact. So no one's ever asked me about that name.
Yeah.
But my wife s- still gets the irony of the fact that when she's shouting out Joanne, she's actually shouting out the name of my first
Of
girlfriend,
girlfriend.
my first crush. So, so, so there's a certain kind of
Yeah,
weirdness about the
exactly. I
story.
love
But
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing how you can become attached. But anyway, my my
Yeah.
my the my family name that my parents I inherited from my parents is Manley, Manley, and I just couldn't. I just thought that as a trans person, it's just there's just too much humor in it. So
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I've been called womanly at school
Yeah.
as a tease half my life. You know, it's kind of and to sort of transition. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't face that.
No.
I just wasn't mentally strong enough to be able to look people in the eyes and then go, "Are you kidding?" And I go, "No, I'm not."
Is that why you went into doing some comedian work? Because of these things that have happened in your life? Because I know you've done stand
Um,
up, haven't you? A little bit.
uh, well, I did a lot of after dinner speaking when I was in my previous sort of role. I was the national president of an organisation called the Round Table.
Yeah.
And for those of you who may have heard of it, it's a global organisation for men between the ages of 40 or 45, depending on which country you're in, so 18 and 45. And so I was the national president of that in 2008, 2009. So part of that role, and when I was area chairman and the chair of the local club, it's kind of after dinner speaking and running meetings. And I was traveling around to other clubs and functions and doing their sort of state of the nation tour. And I was always the warm up for the comedian or the guest speaker or the
Right.
paid speaker. Uh, and there's always this expectation that I'd be entertaining. So as well as doing a bit of "come on, troops, we can do this" sort of stuff, I also had a little bit of a comedy routine. So I was quite used to doing some after dinner speaking. People have always called me a bit of a joker. I've always kind of been light-hearted and jovial and kind of a troublemaker, I suppose.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to do a bit of stand-up, it didn't scare me because I'd done stand-up. Not comedy club type stand-up, more after dinner speaking stand-up, which is a complete, I
Different
think we
game.
got Peter Edge on the call. There's a
Yeah.
big difference between after dinner stand-up and comedy club stand-up. The audiences are different. They're both challenging, but the way you deliver the comedy, I think, is completely different.
Yes.
Because I think some of the after dinner stuff is more because you get to know your audience a bit more first, and you can pull people out the crowd. You work out some of the characters, and you can weave them into your jokes and stuff. So it's a different sort of experience. Whereas stand up, you're very much more detached, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was used to doing a lot of stand up, a lot of comedy stuff. So when someone said, "Do you want to do some stand up?" In fact, you saw me at the Professional Speakers Association.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought, well, let's do it. And then I said, let's do it. And then 3 days before I was due to go on, I thought, well, what's my gig? I didn't have a gig. I actually, I think I went to bed that night. I think I left you in the bar and said, right, I need to go up to the room now because I've
Yeah.
got to do the stand up tomorrow and I need to write the routine. So I literally went upstairs and wrote the routine the night before.
Yes.
On a fag packet, well, I think it was the hotel note paper you get by the
Yes.
side of your bed with a pen.
Yeah.
I think I used that as the to write the act, and then I stood up the next day as you saw and delivered it. So yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't. But I based it on the irony of being trans and the questions I get asked and the situations I've had. So it was a very easy routine because it was all true stories. It was all kind
Yeah.
of it was comedy around observation of what's happened to me. So it was quite
Yeah.
easy to do.
Yes. Can I? There's a few comments I want to tell you about in a minute, but I want to go on to the penultimate place really. What first of all, before I do that, what's your artifact? What did you bring with you to demonstrate what you're doing today? Oh,
I've got my chattery teeth. So what these are is I I, I decided I wanted to start a podcast,
yes.
and I decided I was going to call my podcast Inclusion Bites, BITES. And so when I was trying to do the artwork and the setup for the podcast, and I've also got a newsletter now called Spotlight, which is Inclusion Bites Spotlight. I decided in my head I had this picture of these teeth as being the bites, the
Right.
inclusion bites. So I googled some images and I didn't like any that I found, and I thought, well, let me buy the teeth and take my own photographs. I've actually photographed these teeth on a green screen. I've had them chattering around the desk, and I've got some little video of it running around.
Yes.
And so when you look at the artwork for my podcast, these are the teeth that I photographed. So
Well,
they, they are the teeth that I've used.
I didn't
So I
know
thought
that.
I actually own. I not only do I own the copyright, I own the teeth. So yeah, that's. And sometimes if someone's on mute, I go, oh, I can't hear you. Can you put your teeth in?
It kind of proves the point that artifacts can really help. Can I just tell you, Joe, the chat in the room isn't working properly tonight, so I'll just have to read this to you directly from the streams. But Tom Morley has said he thought the Google Box people were actually very sympathetic towards you, and it was quite moving to see them having their minds blown in a good way. Was that how you felt about it?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was very true to life, and the reason I like showing it as part of my training is
Yeah.
because I know that they're thinking that in the audience. So it's actually a reflection of society. I think Gogglebox is a slice through society, top to bottom.
Yes.
And so I know when I walk on stage or I walk into a group of people, there are some people who have those thoughts. Okay, some of them are negative, some of them are more positive, but they're kind of like the typical average, the curiosity, the well-meaning, but don't know. And I think it's very
Yes.
insightful to listen to them.
Yeah, yes. I've got some feedback from Peter Edge. He thought your routine was excellent at the comedy night. But he's also referencing your film reference. He's got, I want your boots, your jacket, and your motorcycle. Oh, you really are a comedian, Peter Edge. Yeah. And Joanne Wright has said, Marianne, your children stand by you. That this is real love. There is nothing more important than that. Oh, that's giving me goosebumps.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't watched the series, The Making of Me or the Gogglebox, you will see the immense pain that my wife Marie was going through, and I, I I often describe it as trying to do the most selfish thing in the world in the least selfish way, because you don't transition for anybody else. I didn't do this for anybody else, therefore, by definition, is selfish. And
Yeah,
we can, yeah, often people see the word selfish as being a negative word, but I was doing it for myself, therefore it was selfish.
yeah.
And I don't see that as negative or self-destructive. But
Mm-hmm.
then I was also recognizing that I was the pain causer and I was the pain fixer. And this is like going to the Green Mile. We got Bubba, the big black guy.
Big guy. Yeah,
He sucks the pain out of people, and all those sort of like bees or whatever that comes out of them. And that's how I
yeah,
felt with my wife, where I could see the pain in her eyes, the struggle she was facing day to day going through this. And all I could do was suck this out. And of course, by sucking her pain out, I transferred it into me.
yeah,
And I was kind of tumbling down to make her feel better. And we got to this point where if I felt happy, it made her sad. And she was sad, I felt sadder, if that makes sense. And it kind
yeah,
of, I was almost like being penalized for getting on with my life and being happy
mm-hmm.
by the negativity it caused her. So it took a lot of talking, and Channel 4 being marriage guidance, basically. We were filming this documentary. We were being interviewed for a day every 4 to 6 weeks. We were with the camera crew for a day every 4 to 6 weeks. And they were really shining this in our eyes, saying, so how do you feel? How does that make you feel? What is this? What do you think about? So really, really deep questions that you would never have talked about. And
Yes,
so whilst I look back at it and go, wow, that was a huge amount of anxiety, huge amount of pain we went through with them. And it's very disruptive to our life. I look back with fond memories and feel that we wouldn't have come through this in the same way without them, because it allowed us to explore our feelings in a way we could never have done on our own.
yes. And the final part, really, but this might be the most interesting part in many ways, because one of the things that I really believe is important about what the reason I do this show, Joanne, is because I believe that stories can act as an empathy engine. You know, they can help people understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, whether it's compassion or empathy. We could argue about that in another place, but and I think already you've given me goosebumps about 4 times, and I know you. And I think that is credit to you, because I personally don't think we hear enough of each other's stories, and whether that's about your sexuality, or whether that's about even I mean, how few stories do we hear about COVID on the television so you can actually understand the individual's experience of it? It's all data, but it's the stories that sell the thing. It's not the data. So I think your story to this point has been beautiful, and certainly for me, and I'll ask people to tell me what they think in a minute. If you could put it in the chat, folks, what you think so far. But can I ask you? It's maybe a slightly odd question, but has your story changed since you went through, 4 or 5 years ago till today? Do you tell it any
Oh, for
different
sure.
today?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, obviously, I've got the making of me, the TV documentary that I can always refer back to. I know exactly when that was shot in 2016, 2017, or 2018,
yeah,
and I watched it back a couple of months ago. The scene where I was filling in the forms for my passport, and what I was talking about at the time, and I almost didn't recognize myself. It was
really,
like watching an echo of another time or another person, and it took a real deep. I mean, I started crying watching myself back because I've
right,
forgotten that pain or that torment about changing my name, filling that form in, and what that meant to my relationship, and how Marie was uncomfortable with it, and the challenge I'd have, and what brought me happiness gave her sadness, and that was kind of the yin and the yang I faced. And I also look back at some podcasts I recorded back in those early days. I did a, I did a after there was a play being shown 2 nights in Bedford in 2017 in the April,
mm-hmm,
and it was around a trans character, and I got in touch. I was in touch with this guy called Mike Elliston who wrote it and was the director, and he wanted me to come along and narrate and do the story afterwards. So the play was shown. Then he wanted me to come on and say, as a trans person, this is what I felt, this is what I saw, this is the narrative that I picked up on this, and kind of do this post-show narration,
yeah,
followed by a bit of a lived experience talk, followed by Q&A.
yeah,
And he recorded one of those talks, and I watched that back, and I thought, wow, I know I said that, but I don't remember the pain or the thing that made me want to say that. And I think as we move on, those past experiences, those past traumas and pains and things, they fade. And the way I describe my transition today is a lot more positive than when I was in the middle of it.
right,
I'm more detached. I've almost forgotten, if you like, I transitioned because I've gone so far in my
yes,
mind. I mean, it's only 4 years, but I've come so far in accepting who I am, being accepted. Most of the people I know, such as yourself,
yeah,
some good friends, I can see on the side here, Tom and
mm-hmm,
Pete,
mm-hmm,
people like that. You've only known me as me.
yeah,
So my life, I talked about being Arnold Schwarzenegger, coming through with only what was dangling between my legs at the time.
yes.
Um, I that's another image you don't need. Uh,
God, I was just thinking that. Funny enough.
um,
Yeah,
so
like,
yeah, so I've almost all of the investment I made up to that point. I've cut those chains. I'm no longer dependent on on my old life. I
yes,
don't live in the same property. I don't hang out with the same friends. I've still got the friends, but we
yes,
don't have like a codependent relationship like we used to.
mm-hmm,
So everybody I now know hang around with network value in
yeah,
my life is new.
yeah,
So in that context, I don't have this kind of grey area. I don't have this kind of Peter can't unsee this. Yeah, I saw that before. I don't have this kind of grey area of being forced back into my old life.
yes,
And the very rare occasions I do meet old friends, or I have to put myself back in that environment, I find it really tricky. I find it really, really hard. And I
yes,
feel so uncomfortable. I want to escape from there as quick as possible because it brings back all of those old thoughts,
right,
all that old pain.
yes,
Whereas I can, it's not, I'm not erasing or blocking it out
yeah,
in that kind of negative way. It just isn't me anymore.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's like meeting an old university friend and only talking about what you did at university,
yes,
and you've moved on completely, and it's kind of they're still living in that past and you're not. But
yes,
the trouble I have with my friends is the reason we can't really develop our relationship anymore is because we haven't reinvested. So we've only got history, we haven't got present or
yes,
future.
yes,
And I don't want to keep talking about history because that history isn't my history. It's a past history, and I don't want to keep going back to it.
yes,
And so
yes,
unless I create new memories with them and create new history, it's
yeah,
never going to be easy. Which is
yeah,
why I find it so much less stressful talking to you, talking to my new friends,
yes,
and enjoying my current life because it's all new history. I'm creating
yes,
new memories with no legacy, and
yeah.
that's the power of where I am now. And I don't look back. I'm looking forwards, and it's
Yeah.
a fantastic place to be.
Do you know, Joe, I admire you massively, you know that. But I would suspect that if you showed your workings to your friends in another form, maybe a written form or something, that they would come towards you, Joe.
Oh no,
Um,
no, don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
We've had drunken conversations. We've sat there and talked about this, and
okay,
we've all come to the same conclusion. We
yeah,
don't have new memories, and we all sat down about 8 months ago before COVID and said we need to make a conscious effort to create new memories and new
yes,
with me as me, and do
yeah,
the same things, but do it again for real. It's sort of, and yet COVID hit, and that kind of put the scuppers on it. But I have got a couple of great friends, and one of my best friends of old, he was one of the first people to embrace me, and
yeah,
actually said he said, let's go out for a meal, let's get to know you.
brilliant.
But I mean, to be
Yeah.
fair to him, he was very insistent it wasn't a date. He's going, this is not a date. This is not a date. It's not a date. And of course, once he said that, I was going,
Yeah.
come on, then, you and me, you and me.
Again, Joe, that again, the way you tell your story, again, you do certain, you have a certain way of self-deprecation, don't you? I mean, you're not, and I know that there are things that I'm like for everybody that will get you will be like red hot buttons for you. I'm sure there are, but you have that way of telling your story, and I don't mean to patronize. Please tell me if I'm patronizing. I don't mean to be, but I find it very easy talking to you. You said earlier about the elephant in the room. I find it very easy to talk to you about your elephant in the room because you've told me your story. And I think it is, it's obviously a testament to you, but it's also a testament to storytelling because if people know your story, they can empathize with it. Don't you think that's true? Must be.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. If I don't tell you anything about me, you can't know anything about me. You
Yeah.
can't you can't
Yeah.
help me.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
share something about me
Yes.
within my safety limits, then you can help me. Provided I
Yeah.
trust you. If I trust you to use that knowledge for good,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what the internet's going to do with this knowledge, but hopefully the
Yes.
internet will use this knowledge for good. Then
Yes.
I bring you into my trust zone, and then we
Yeah.
can talk. But
Yes.
what I've also got to be careful of is that I'm comfortable talking like this. So you can't, no one can assume that another trans person or another person in
Oh,
my
no.
circumstance is as
No.
comfortable being this open. And so the danger is people get used to me thinking it's
Yeah.
okay to talk like this. And I've
Yeah.
also got to be very careful is that not everybody wants to be open. Not everybody has my lived experience. Not everybody has my life experience.
Yeah.
So I've got to be careful that I don't set this benchmark where
Yeah.
people can think they can talk to anybody like this. And so I
Yes.
represent one person, me.
Yeah.
I
Of
don't
course.
speak for anybody else. I don't pretend to speak for anybody else.
Yeah.
This is me.
Yeah.
So as long as
Absolutely.
people understand that my openness isn't universal, it's just
Hmm.
me, and
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with who I am. Other
Yes.
people have a different way of describing themselves and being comfortable. So I think that's the important thing to take away from it is that
Yeah.
you've met me, and this is my story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Joanne, I have to say thank you very, very much for tonight. And I'll repeat, thanks for sharing your workings because it is fantastic and it's such a great example of the power of story. And I know from the comments that actually there's one here that's very funny. Drunken conversations. I find that very hard to believe. That was Peter again. Maybe I
Well,
should ban you from this channel, Peter. You know us too well. So we have to finish now. So thank you very much. But before we do, where can people get hold of you? Is it the website? Is that the best place for people to see you, or is there other places you'd like to point them
yeah.
toward?
I always signpost people to LinkedIn. So if you search for Joe Lockwood, J-O
Yeah.
Lockwood
Okay.
at LinkedIn or Joanne Lockwood on LinkedIn, you should recognise me. seachangehappen.co.uk is it. Well, you'll find my YouTube channel, my Twitter, my Facebook, everything from there. Or
Okay.
Google my name, Joanne Lockwood.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
there's only one person that appears on the first 4 or 5 pages, and they're dead. So, so on the basis I'm not dead, you should look for the one that's moving.
Well, just remains for me to say thank you very much, Joanne. I hope everyone found that as interesting as I did. And I think next week we've got quite a lot to think about, haven't we? So thank you. Thanks for all your comments. And I really look forward to seeing you all next week on the next episode of Artifact Storytelling Live. Thank you.
Bye.